We had a good little break, part two with Shannon at Chainring Queen, and I think we've decided we've got the advocacy bit on deck still, but I think the other part we want to talk about, and that was one of the posts I liked from your Instagram feed, was you pointed out that, and I'm trying to get this right because I'm not going to get the cutoffs right, but basically, and this is, we're pointing at Zwift now, but I think this is a problem across the industry and across society, arguably, right? That Zwift is oversimplifying people's bodies a little bit, and I think you said there's two basically avatar sizes in terms of they're for women and three for men. Interestingly,
yes.
So there's a little bit more room for diversity on the men's side apparently for sizes, and for the women there's you're either the large or the small. So
no, you're the small or the medium.
The small or the medium.
You can't be the large.
Okay, yeah. So I think that's probably that's actually a really good point. That's the more accurate way of putting it.
Yeah.
And there's BMI cutoffs, right, based on the data that you input, because you self-select your height and you self-select your weight.
Yes.
Supposedly accurately, but who cares? That doesn't really matter right now. And for the male, you actually get more of a. And it's probably also more of a XS small and medium. I don't know. I actually haven't looked at it.
Male avatars get muscles.
Accurate? Okay, good. So let's talk about that, because I maybe haven't paid much attention to it, because usually like on Zwift, I don't know. I'm not. But this is a thing I've noticed. There is a little bit of variability with avatars, but I didn't really know. I just assumed that it would kind of grow proportionally with the data you put in. You know, that you go this way or that way. But then you posted, and I was like, yeah, I think that actually makes a lot of sense, because I feel like some people are not small enough, or not big enough, or I'm not big enough. And so tell us a little bit more about that, and I think that is kind of naturally going to go into a conversation about allowing for different sizes, in not just in, because again we're picking on Zwift here, but we could easily start with anybody else too.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little.
Well, I mean, I'm a big proponent for more size inclusivity in cycling. So this really caught my attention as, you know, someone who's, you know, moderately serious cyclist.
Yeah.
Don't really ever know how to classify myself, but, you know, I do Zwift. I did train through the winter, you know, and when Zwift, it was about a month and a half, maybe 2 months ago now, where they had one of their updates, and all of a sudden on the Aviator selection, it was BMI based, which is your body mass index.
Oh, that was a change? That wasn't there before?
Yeah, it was like one of their, you know how they have updates every now and then. And all of a sudden, the men's Aviators had 3 body choices, small, medium, or large, and they base, like you're mentioning, you know, you have your height and your weight to get your power and different metrics. And for the women, there was a small or medium size choice. Well, you know, I'm an extra large cyclist, let's face it, you know.
So no matter what you put in, really,
so,
you're either...
No, you know, so, and I couldn't figure out why my Aviator doesn't look anything. I mean, you know, it looks like a half-size version of me, you know, and maybe some people would like that. But as someone who, I mean, I powerlift, I train to cycle, I'm a former national champion athlete, that bothered me. You know, I have, you know, and it gets into bigger societal, you know, things of how women are portrayed, but you know, why can't we be strong athletes? You know, why this game that's taking over, you know, for endurance athletes is, you know, kind of pushing those same sort of societal, you know, thin woman aspects. Not only is that super unhealthy, you know, but it's, you know, more that U.S., you know, portrayal of woman of, you know, where I'm all about be strong and healthy, you know, and so it bothered me, and I wrote to Zwift, and I made that Instagram post. It got the attention of Peaks Coaching Group, which is fortunate. They're the developers of Training Peaks, which is a pretty popular platform that endurance-based athletes use. I was fortunate to attend their women's cycling camp in Florida last well, I guess 2 Februarys ago now. But they noticed it. You know, they consider me one of their athletes since I've been you know, worked with some of their coaches in the past. And they wrote a note to Zwift on their behalf. It also caught the attention of Celine Yeager, who's Fit Chick. She's pretty known.
For Bicycling Magazine.
Yeah, she publishes some articles on Bicycling Magazine. And you know, their response from Zwift was that they didn't have, you know, basically, you know, the technical resources. You know, it would require a system overhaul to to change, to give the same options to women. Well, I happen to work in tech, and I, kind of call BS on that, to be honest, because, if you have the code base, to make 3 versions for the men, and this gets into bigger things of, woman, we pay the same, I don't know, it's like $17 now a month for, like, not only is it fewer choices and less options for women, but this gets into, bigger issues. For me as a larger sized athlete, that, it's like another limiting, kind of, it's like another, kind of door closer limiting factor that shouldn't be there.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no reason really for it,
Yeah.
And, I just felt like their response was less than adequate. They, kind of, and I was surprised that...
I call BS on that too, but I don't know. I don't have the technical understanding, but to be fair, but yeah.
Yeah. So, that gets into more, I've been seriously road cycling for 5 years now, and, I couldn't find a kit that fit me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how people are, familiar with kit, but, you have your jersey and then you have your bibs or your, your shorts with the chamois. And for women's cycling kits, literally they tend to run 1 to 2 sizes smaller of your, normal, your jeans or your t-shirts that you buy.
Tight.
They fit. They're snug, okay?
Or smaller
they're
than
supposed
usual.
to be aerodynamic or something. Who knows? But
let's just say that the medium at Old Navy is not the medium at what are you, right? Yeah.
I'll say this. I'm a large and athleta. Yoga pants and top. In cycling clothing, I'm a 2 to 3X. Okay.
Wow.
So, yeah.
From athleta.
For women's, and large or extra large. I mean, it depends on tops or bottoms and the style, but still, it's literally I have to size up about 2 sizes in cycling kits. When I started cycling, getting into road cycling 5 years ago, the largest size you can find is a double XL, and even at that, it would be.
That was for women's, or it was a men's? So was
for women's,
or gender neutral, or whatever.
There's different brands and different, but I literally probably tried all of them. I mean, and kits aren't cheap. They're, it's expensive, So in a lot of shops in New York City, they, you got like 2 or 3, maybe if you're lucky to choose from. Okay. So you're ordering this online, you're paying $150, and then you're having to return it and post office and go. Nobody wants to go to the post office in New York City, unless you got 5 hours in your day. But anyway, and so I've been a big proponent. I started writing to kit manufacturers. Your Pearl Izumi, Specialized, Machines for Freedom's popped up in the past few years, Volicio, and saying, hey, we exist. There are serious riders out there, who want, gear that performs, that is comfortable, and it's another barrier that shouldn't be there to get people on bikes, and that's why I became sort of an outspoken voice in this area, because I personally took 5 years, and just now in the past literally 6 months, some higher end bike brands have now extended. Machines for Freedom, Volicio, and Pearl Izumi just released 3X sizes. Okay. This is 5 years later after. I mean, I'm sure there's other advocates in the space bringing it to their attention as well. But even that, I can find bibs that fit. Try finding a ride jacket that fit. Nearly impossible. Okay. And this isn't just cycling. This is even like outdoor brands too. There's a major hurdle that just shouldn't be there. And it's, as someone who can, ride. I mean, I rode 100 miles this past weekend. I'm a larger body, but I'm also fit, athletic, and strong. So there's like this disorientation in the cycling industry that you should be, I hate to say it, I don't want to do any body shaming either direction, but very, these stick fin figures.
I think there's a cult. Certainly in the road cycling community, cult always losing another 5 pounds for whatever you are currently. And that's unhealthy. In a lot of ways. Yeah, and so that's. I'm happy. I found that the smaller brands actually have been more receptive. There's actually a new brand started by 2 women out of the Seattle area. They're a little more mountain bike focused.
gosh, now I'd love to give them a shout out. Great
okay,
gals,
well,
but they're starting
can
a
look
new
it up.
brand.
Okay. That's not the women. That's not the machine.
Ride
ones.
Cosmic Dirt. Is
Okay.
it? It's
Ride-
a very Cosmic Dirt.
Cosmic
Anyway,
Dirt.
they're mountain bike focused, but they're gonna. They're just launching. They just sort of had a pre-sale event, and they're gonna go up to 4X. So I'm really happy to start seeing that there
We'll
are
put on the show
brands.
notes. Yep.
And this even gets into the more, the portrayal of, what does a cyclist look like, from a gender, from a, racial, from a size, body size. The industry has a long way to go on representation. There are some brands that I think are making progress.
Mhm.
I think the cycling industry as a whole really has some work to do on that aspect.
I fully agree. I think progress is happening in some areas now, a little bit accelerated more so than others. But I think there's obviously, ways to go. And I think the Zwift is just one example. The clothing is, I think, even more important to the everyday person, right? Because it is such an issue. And if you talk that you want to be inclusive, you got it. This is an easy step. I think an easy step that bike manufacturers can make, right? Or by bicycle clothing manufacturers. We talk about the bike manufacturers too, in producing things that work for everybody and not just for the skinniest. But that's another story.
I learned that people don't know that there's weight limits for bikes, and it's something that should be known. I started breaking a lot of components on my bike.
We're talking about Chainring Queen comes from bending chain rings.
Bending chain rings. I mean, I'm strong. Not to do my own horn, but I can throw down the watts if I need to. So, it's with more people, if we're really going to make this accessible and inclusive, it's got to go way beyond, it's got to get into the gear, into the manufacturing of the bikes, into the components. I think there is, in the past year, I've seen a little bit more receptive, people being receptive to it. But, this is what, I don't even know, 100+ year old industry, I think more people need to speak up and demand that change and, hey, we exist, because if you don't, and it's, kind of can be a touchy topic. It took me a while to speak out on it, but I think now that I'm sort of at a level, where, they have to listen,
so
and
you have to be comfortable.
If I have that
too,
voice,
right?
I think I want to use it, to, if you can't find the right gear, you're not going to get more, people on bikes. So, it's a hurdle.
Absolutely.
And
I think
that's a barrier. Yeah.
Well, especially in the US, where historically speaking, it hasn't really been in every person's kind of sport, right? It has really been a sport more so than like getting around, and that the average person's commuting and riding a bike. So I think hopefully with that and the recent bike boom changes are coming, and that a little bit transitions. I think you have a very similar approach to. I think when prep for the interview, I asked provocatively, and I'm just going to say that I asked it that way provocatively to see kind of what comes back. Is it harder for women to get into cycling, or is it harder for women to be cyclists in New York City, especially maybe? And I want to see what comes back. And I think we had a good conversation here just now. And I think your approach there is very similar. And I think that makes a lot of sense in terms of highlighting again, like the diversity there in that group. And we can talk about non-male or again, whatever you identify, but let's just say non-male cyclists or cisgender male cyclists, wherever you want to draw the line now. But is it harder? And your response was a very good one, I think. And again, I asked this more in that kind of provocative journalist kind of style, which I don't usually do, but I thought you would have some good things to say. So
I'll be honest, when I saw that question, it got me a little heated.
Good.
Because a lot of people think that, women are, weak or nimble or fearful of being out on New York City streets. And I think for a certain subset of women that is true. But, maybe for others who have grown up with the, athletic background as I don't, to me, that's a little nerve-wracking, to hear as the number one reason that women won't get out and bike. I think there's unseen barriers, for example, city bikes that, are growing throughout, that's a real entry port for some people into New York City cycling.
Like you mean like getting on a city bike?
Some people don't. Road bikes are expensive, sometimes it's a financial or economic hurdle people, or they live in the outer boroughs like I do, and their nearest subway station is a half mile away, like there's real tangible things. I've ridden a city bike. Those things are heavy, and
Yeah.
I'm a large, I'm a strong athlete.
Mhm.
I have trouble docking those things.
Yeah.
Okay, I looked it up. They weigh 40 pounds. I think the e-bikes are even heavier now. But for a petite woman, I actually taught one of my assembly members. We'll get into this more on the advocacy side. How to ride. She was a smaller petite woman, and she was really struggling to pedal it. And it reminded me of teaching my nephew of how to ride a bike. And he had a children's bike that was too heavy for him, and he didn't want to ride it. He always got resistance. And I did, some research, being the cyclist good auntie that I am, and I, realized that he literally didn't have, he was having a hard time pedaling. We got him a ladder bike. He flies around the neighborhood now.
Awesome.
If I apply that to city bikes, of who are they designing things for? They're designing it for a average sized male.
Mhm.
They're not devising or developing these accessibility tools and transportation tools, for different sized riders.
Mhm.
You can also get into visibility on the road. I have some friends, we have with Women Cycling, who are under 5 feet tall, petite sized women. There is an inherent more danger just because you aren't as visible to drivers. So, there's these unseen barriers that unless you, have, been active and, seen a lot of variable, genders and body types on bikes, that, are hurdles that maybe, aren't seen on, or discussed as often.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And I think you're right with the city bikes. I mean, I'm a pretty tall and reasonably strong dude. I think then it requires some weight to push them in and to get them out. And I think what I see a lot of people struggle with, especially people who are a little smaller, because they're so heavy that you have to get them going for them to get stable. They're very unstable because they're so heavy. If you're starting to move them, and if you make the wrong move, I see just the other day in Prospect Park, I saw a little kid crash on them because he made a slight little move, and granted some of that is experience, but again, when you talk about bringing people into riding bikes through city bikes, then that 40 pounds, I think you said, bike is. It's challenging. It's not that comfortable to ride, or it isn't until you have reached a certain speed, the
turning radius. I'm fortunate. I have access to road bikes that with very quick. You can turn. I know how to corner a bike.
Right.
These are racing skills.
Right.
Can't. But. My biggest near accident was actually on a city bike, because I was used to being able to make a quick turn and didn't realize that it's so heavy, the turning radius is
tricky.
It's tricky, and it topples very easily. So there's things like that, unless you've been on different types of bikes, that you may not realize.
It's very top heavy, I think, too,
but but I think this applies, getting back to your main question of the hurdles, or is it harder to be a woman and cyclist in New York City? I know male commuters that are just as concerned as being on being involved in the advocacy side. Everybody wants to get home alive. Okay, it doesn't matter if you race, if you're going to the grocery store, if you're commuting for transportation. It's that's where I get into the infrastructure stuff, because I don't care if you're the strongest female, or you're there's a lot of males too that are afraid to be on New York City streets. So that's why I sometimes get that question can go a lot of different directions, because I don't think it's just the females that are too scared to be riding in New York City. Honestly, it's infrastructure issue that everyone should feel safe. And I don't care your age, your gender, your your capability level. That's where we need to get, and that gets into where we need to head as New York City, where we're thinking about really making cycling accessible for all.
And you were involved with that too. Perfect transition. Real quick, I think we're all grateful for City Bike existing in a lot of ways in the cycling community, but I think it's also important to push them and to continue to say it's not. There's room for improvement everywhere, and I think it's good to give them feedback there too. So I think But let's transition into city bikes continue to expand into Sunset Park, at least in Brooklyn. I don't know about the current Queens expansion plans, but you're involved in advocacy too, and you're doing a lot there too, and you have done for a while now too. You mentioned one particular project, which I'll let you talk about if you want to.
Sure.
But you're largely doing it through TransAlt and the one of the Queens, what are they called, local committee or subcommittees or something like that. And what do you do? What do you get involved with? What are some of the things you have been involved with or are currently involved with?
Sure, yes. So, there are inherent risks riding New York City. Sadly, 2019, I think, was the highest number of cyclist deaths in New York. And that's when I just, it was actually earlier than that. 2017 is when I kind of learned that transportation alternatives exist. They have working groups by boroughs. I'm part of the, I'm on the Queens TA committee, where they have a monthly meeting and we discuss, where people are seeing like major, safety threats or challenges. They have a lot of data behind this, like real statistics. And my main concern was I live in Astoria in Queens, and I couldn't get through my neighborhood. Queens is a very car-centric, borough. We are, further from Manhattan, so a lot of people own cars, and I didn't feel safe getting to the Queensboro Bridge to get into Manhattan, to get to Central Park, to meet my, to host a ride or to, do laps. It was like I was getting on the carrying my bike up the subway stairs, to get to Central Park. And I was like, or I'd have to take Vernon Boulevard, which, if you're familiar with Queens, it doubles your time. It's a nice scenic waterfront route, but people weren't thinking about, DOT is not thinking of, thinking about a leisurely Sunday ride, not of transportation of, if I'm a cyclist, why should I have to, go an extra 5 miles when I'm carrying it myself versus a car, right? Exactly. Instead of, so anyway, I got involved with Queens TA committee, and there was actually, we're fortunate, Juan, who's the Queens TA chair, he actually grew up in Astoria, in McCartney, another cyclist in the neighborhood, where we are all, we want to be able to ride through a neighborhood, and we came from sort of very different subsectors of New York City cycling, which I think was interesting. I'm kind of more the roadie, and there were more the social and commuting cyclists, but we all agreed that we wanted to get through our neighborhood safely. So we embarked on a campaign. We got active on social media. We called it Bike to Queensboro Bridge. We wanted to connect the Triborough to the Queensboro Bridge, the heart of Astoria, which is the Queensboro Bridge is one of the few entrances into Manhattan for cyclists. It turned into a 4-year advocacy project. We got over 2,000 people, local residents, involved in it. This took tons of time, meeting with elected officials. We got our council member involved. Costa was a great supporter. Our assemblywoman involved at the time, up to state senator levels. Some people don't realize some of this funding for bike infrastructure comes through city funds, some comes through New York state funds. I learned a ton through this project and how political it was. I literally thought I was, kind of, going to be working on a local community project, and I suddenly was meeting with, assembly members and senators and doing press conferences, which, I had no experience in, quite frankly. But with gaining the support in the community and getting active on social media, we found out that, this wasn't just 5 of us in the neighborhood. This was thousands of people that, from all different sides of cycling, right? From your, the delivery worker who's just trying to do their job and, just like the rest of us, doesn't want to get hit by, a trucker, who wants to, be safe on the street. It turned into a 4-year advocacy project. Is one of TA's major wins. It did go in actually through the pandemic. Interestingly enough, it is now installed. We are still actively advocating for it, though. It's this struggle,
Still working on it.
In that, they put down green paint, they put down flexi posts. This is an area with a high truck route. It's a main artery to a major bridge. We're asking DOT for Jersey barriers. We want real protection. Sadly, there's already been a death since the bike lane was installed. A truck hit a cyclist. So when these, it shouldn't take 4 or 5 years of advocacy for these projects.
Right.
This is why, transportation and other advocacy groups in New York, I know Bike New York as well, recently held the Mayoral Candidate Forum.
Yep.
And we need monumental shifts in the thinking of cycling infrastructure in New York City.
Not just another bike lane here, another bike lane there. I think that needs to be something bigger and more coherent. I agree. Now that line, and a couple of terminology things for people who are not that familiar. The flexi posts are kind of the plastic thingies that bend when you kind of hit them or anybody touches them, and you're advocating for something else.
Jersey barriers, concrete. Those are the big. Actually, Brooklyn's got a few. I don't know. We don't have them over in Queens. I don't know.
I think in Williamsburg, when you kind of go around the corner there.
Bend. I noticed they're there. If that's a semi truck, we have a lot of illegal 53 tractor trailers, which are illegal in New York City. There's no regulation against them. That's a whole nother topic we can get into another day. But quite frankly, there's not going to be a high survival rate with a flexi post and a semi truck.
That doesn't stop any car.
That's not going to stop anyone. So yes, is it improved? Yes, but should it take 4 or 5 years of people
And this is, I think you said, Crescent
asking
Street, right?
for this. Yeah, this is Crescent Street in Astoria. But we need real connected cycling infrastructure, not a bike lane here or there that goes for a mile or two that doesn't connect to anything. Because people are, especially this has come to height during the pandemic with, subway usage has been down significantly. You barely can find an entry-level bike in New York City right now. I mean, we're sold out. They don't, we have all types and abilities as cyclists. Again, everyone should feel safe, but we need the proper infrastructure to really allow for that, so everyone can feel safe. And that doesn't matter if, male, female, or, it's just everybody wants to get home alive. So that's why I got so passionate about the advocacy side. Because I personally was facing a major challenge getting through my own neighborhood.
And I think that's how people often get into it. And it's great. I mean, I think that's what's needed. And you mentioned Bike New York hosted all the candidates for mayor in New York City. Were there at least the vast majority showed up?
I don't know if it was all, but it was.
That's probably a first that they all got to speak. And
it
wasn't
a
bikes only,
number,
but it was definitely like, how do we change it from, or I guess the question was really probably more general. Should we change it from a more car-centric environment and really rethink infrastructure planning in the city? And I think a lot of them, at least in this forum, showed awareness and showed that they have some sort of plan, some more aggressive than others. And I think people can look that up. And there's lots of different ideas, and I don't think anybody knows what exactly the best idea is, but there's lots of good ideas. And again, we need a little bit more than just a bike lane here in order to please people and shut people up for a few years. I think you're right that it needs to be something bigger, and also another area where we need bigger changes and not just super tiny incremental unplanned kind of changes. Maybe if we want to avoid what we, like you said, we had in 2019 almost 30 I think cyclists dying in traffic, and that's a shocking number. It's to me, these things don't come out with a Vision Zero thing when that's not going to happen, and then it's probably better just commit to some aggressive changes in terms of the infrastructure planning. But what maybe we can talk about, what are there, so that's still wrapping up the Crescent Street program, because like you said, there's still maybe change to these other type of barriers, maybe there's still other improvements to be made. So you're still working on that? Are you planning on getting involved in more of that, or after 4 years of really intense work, maybe
I'll say, it's a lot of time, it's challenging. It's, we need more cyclists to attend community board meetings. More cyclists, because this is where the change, I don't know, how familiar people are of how these changes happen, but I
think you can
you have to the one positive thing to come out of COVID is that most community boards are now hosting their meetings virtually, so there's lowers, instead of having to go to some location after work and sit through a 3-hour meeting, you can attend virtually, and there's more room for public comment. When in person, the loudest voice in the room typically wins. With the Zoom forums, you can write in the comment sections, and those get recorded. But if we don't have cyclists showing up at those meetings, I mean, there's a whole thing where community boards aren't representation of their neighborhoods in general, especially,
right.
I've seen this personally in Queens, usually older population, retired folks
Well,
who've lived in a
time, maybe
neighborhood for a lot of
for-
time. Maybe they have more time to sit through 3-hour meetings, But, there's almost some generational gaps, and, with that comes out, sometimes different levels of progressive, thinking of why these things are needed, right? Often number one, rebuttal is you're taking away my parking space. Should parking spaces be valued more than a person's life? My answer is absolutely no. But people's life should come first. But in a big city, there's going to be varying opinions. But what we need, so this isn't, and I do see a rise in people, attending them, but we need more cyclists for that. I mean, if it was a requirement for every cyclist that's in a bike club in New York City to attend one community board meeting a month, that would go a huge way, because our voices are underrepresented in these meetings. It's one cyclist, against a community board of 30 people that aren't cyclists often. I mean, we are seeing some shifts. I'm in CB1, Queens CB1, but there's actually a new technology. I've been talking with the founder. It's called Block Party. Gal who's got some great data science and AI background, who's actually doing analysis on community board meetings and finding trending topics. And she found that CB1 in Queens and Manhattan, right over the Queensboro, have been trending for the word, certain terms, like she's using semantic analysis. So bikes, cycling, common terminologies. Well, that's due to one of other transportation alternatives initiative, which is More Space Queensboro Bridge. Right now, cyclists are sharing a very narrow, I think it's under 6 feet wide. One side of the path is pedestrians and runners, and the other side's a two-way cycling. There's been an increase on cyclists and cyclist collisions.
Which there isn't really enough space, depending on your handlebar width, for two bikes to pass each other while also passing pedestrians without going to the pedestrian lane.
There's been more injuries. Sadly, just Saturday there was a major cyclist injury on the. And we've been demanding that they open the South Outer Roadway. There's actually existing infrastructure there. It's unused. It used to be a walkway. We overtook it this summer. With required permits notice. But we had a big rally there to get some attention to it. We've gotten some great support of council members on both sides of the bridge, who are basically willing to give funds. The city allocates by council member community board, some discretionary funding. They're like, we'll literally give it to you, because they're saying there needs to be safety netting up there. But these projects get delayed years upon years due to these minor things, that while cyclists continue to be injured and dying on New York City streets. And that's why we really need a mayor that can radically change things without these years and years of delays of the DOT versus different city agencies literally kind of bickering with each other is what it's too bureaucratic, and these changes shouldn't take years upon years to happen.
And some of it is that, like you mentioned, the different city agencies, there's different levels of oversight responsibility, and the MTA owns some of the bridges, I think, or not owns, but runs them or something like that, and lots of different players involved, so it's tricky. And I think we've talked about this briefly. There's a push for making all of the bridges really improving the infrastructure or the accessibility for all of the bridges really. Some of them you're technically required to walk, although we know the reality is a lot of people ride them anyway, like the RFK one, right? I think, for example, or there's a couple down to the Rockaways that the infrastructure that exists is not great, and I think that explains why people say dismount and walk, but you don't have to walk a 1 mile bridge. Nobody's gonna
especially in bike lanes. I
think there's a long way to go, and bridges are tricky, and it makes sense, but I think this is not, like you said, this is not impossible. It just needs to be
Yeah.
a little bit of a push that doesn't necessarily have to come up from the grassroots level always, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
think that's
Bridges
one
for People is the big campaign. If you want to follow on social media, that's
Mhm.
pushing for more accessible, wider lanes and dedicated separated pedestrian and cycling lanes. We want, as an advocate, pedestrians come first.
Yeah.
Everyone, again, somebody walking, running, with a stroller, they should feel just as safe too.
Yeah.
But there's a lack of space in New York City, and cyclists are literally given the edges and the fringes and the crumbs, is what it's coming down to. And we're basically saying, this isn't right. We should demand more.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the great thing is I feel like there has been a shift in thinking, and maybe due to the bike movement, more cyclists, this should have happened. I mean, people have been fighting this, I think, back to the 50s and 70s, probably in New York City, generations of this. But, there has been some significant wins in the past year. So it's exciting to see after 4 or 5 years of advocacy that, maybe this time, all this effort is actually, paying off. So, but yeah, highly invite, again, you can, participate as much as you little, but even if every cyclist just, got, helped a little more on the advocacy side, I think that would go a long way. Because the city needs to hear that, we exist as a community.
Yeah, I think we need to use that opportunity that we have right now with the new mayor getting a little bit more attention, maybe that mayoral race, and then, like you said, lots of people new on bikes and all that. And I think we're in for a big summer of everybody doing everything after they've been closed for. I mean,
Yes.
we all know it has to happen responsibly, but I think the reality is going to be already on one of the first nice days. There's a lot of people here, fairly distant, but it's all in Prospect Park, and we all know that once the summer comes, it's going to be a lot more of that still. So I think we need to use that momentum too, where people are on bikes and are thinking about the limitations of the infrastructure that they are using before they get maybe discouraged by it. So that was a great project, and there's a lot of, you already mentioned the Bridges one. So maybe naturally we can transition into what are, I think we've talked about most of your kind of main, the points of your personal Chainring Queen agenda, let's call it that. Like what are the areas that we need to improve as a community? So can you summarize that? Did we miss one of them? Did we not talk about one of them enough? Where do you see the main areas for improvement in the New York City cycling community, bike community?
Well, I think what I've there's so much one can take on, and I'm one person, and you only have so many, hours in a day. But for me, my sort of main 3 pillars are, get more women or women identifying people on bikes. The advocacy and infrastructure improvements, because that saves lives. And then for me personally, which since I've had so many personal challenges with it, is the the more size inclusivity when it comes to cycling apparel and gear.
Where do you think we're the furthest away from the optimum?
Oh gosh. Oh my.
That's a provocative question.
I
know it's so hard to compare.
Man, that's a surprise one.
Well, I think
they all have their own intricacies, and they all are in a way very different segments. The cycling industry, what I've learned, is quite vast, Yeah. So, there's different stakeholders in each of those groups that you have to communicate with to see the changes happening. But again, I'm one person, and I, decided to take on some of these challenges. Call me crazy, but I've, it has been, 4 or 5 years of literally I was, handwriting to different kit manufacturers, to, getting involved in my local community board and, with transportation alternatives. But one person can have an impact, and I think if anything comes across, be empowered, nobody, like you do have a voice, everyone has a voice, and, use it to make, if there is something that, you feel is, unjust and right, or, could be improved upon, speak up, and, to the right stakeholders. And one thing about New York City, I'll say is, maybe I'm fortunate to live in a district, but, your council members, your assembly members, their job is to fight for their community,
Yeah.
to represent their community. And, this gets a little, not to get political, but, if we're electing the right people,
I think we're being political for sure.
to represent us, I was surprised when they would write me back.
Yeah.
And so they do, that's their job to care and to listen.
Especially at that level where it's that
local level where,
representatives.
I got to teach my assemblywoman how to ride a bike.
Awesome.
And that was a big part of Crescent Street happening.
Mm-hmm.
When she felt she knew how to ride, but she hadn't ridden in many years.
Mm-hmm.
Once she rode a half mile on Crescent Street, she felt the fear.
Yeah.
And I think that's really sometimes a challenge is some of these people in these positions aren't cyclists and they've not physically experienced that, that danger of when, a car close passes you or, a truck or car veers into the bike lane unexpectedly or, whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to get it almost to a personal level for them to really understand. And to me, it was eye-opening once after that ride. That things moved very quickly after that.
That's great.
It didn't. It shouldn't take that level, but that's what Transformation has been doing a lot of. We held the first for District 20. Be like District 26. It's actually the neighboring district to parts of Astoria, Long Island City, Woodside, and Sunnyside. But there's like. We invited, I think 9 showed up, council candidates. It's a very, there's a lot of people running for council seats in that district, and we held the first, I don't know if it was first ever, but maybe at least first ever for Queens Community Council ride, where we gave, each candidate an opportunity, to do a sports, short pitch before the ride, and we highlighted. One of them was entrance to Pulaski Ridge. How terrifying that intersection is, that's that's the fastest growing commuting bridge in New York City right now. More people ride that than, the Brooklyn Bridge.
It's like an into Queens bridge, right? Yeah.
The number of people crossing that bridge, there's a counter on that bridge, but, it's like a 35% increase in the past year alone, okay? And we highlight these things, to get into their platforms. It's been a very effective way to make our leaders understand that this has to be part of their platform, to get the New York City votes. So, again, we do have the power to do effective change. It takes some work, but, you can, for a big city, you can actually get involved pretty easily.
Yeah, so, lots of ways of getting involved. So call to action as always. So you've really created your own little niche, and it's a little maybe, but it's also big in terms of, like you said, you have a lot of contact points for the cycling community. You feel at home there, and you said already when you show up to these advocacy meetings, you're the road cyclist, and you have a lot of different hats on. So what's that niche, and do you feel comfortable in it now? And have you found your place kind of as a cyclist? Are you still developing or changing, or is this like your sweet spot right now?
Oh, I always, one thing, I kind of like a good challenge in life. I don't know, I've always been that sort of driven personality, The fun thing, I think what draws me to cycling is that you can always be improving, it's like, from a physical standpoint of like improving your hill climbing ability or, your speed, your cadence, from, tongue twisted there. I do intersect with.
Sorry, that's definitely a raccoon. All right,
oh my, we got raccoons now. You never know what you can get in New York City, but.
So you found your niche, like as a cyclist with your ride leader, you rode it yourself. Is that your happy spot then? Is that where you feel comfortable? Are you still looking to add some to the repertoire, or are you're pretty happy with where you are now?
For me, again, it's mostly about the, meeting new people, growing the cycling community. I find that there's just a lot of interesting, great people that are cyclists, It's sort of widened my social circle in a way. you know, I'm continually, well, I don't think I'm ever going to race. I like the physical challenge of improving on the bike, if it's, improving different skills. Where to next? I think my mixing, I actually want to get into like touring more and doing like multi-day,
going to Buffalo.
Yeah, exactly. Going to Buffalo, meet me there this summer. But, that's, and once we're able to, travel safely is like, I'm ready to go, like explore the world on a bike. That's sort of where my horizon is more. The great thing about cycling is you can take it so many different angles, but for me, I maybe fortunate being an athlete, like, I can do the multi-day riding, and I like the adventure aspect of it. So, I've also been learning, primarily most of my training's been on road cycling. I got this beautiful gravel bike. I really got it because I want to get more into the gravel scene. Personality wise, I feel like that fits me more than the roadie persona. But I feel like, through the ambassadorship and whatnot, there's some really cool gravel events that I want to start checking out. So I think that's probably the direction I'm heading. But who knows? Yeah. I
think that's a good approach, and I think there's a lot more gravel popping up too, so that's great. And that's hopefully also becoming more inclusive. So that's awesome. Sounds like good plans for 2021.
Yes.
I want to say thank you to Shannon at Chainring Queen. I think we learned a lot about advocacy. We learned a lot about ride leading and all the different opportunities to get involved, whether just from working out and riding and having fun on the bike or going to advocacy. What's the big advocacy project for 2021 to look out for? Is it the mayoral kind of race?
Oh man, there's a lot going on. Yeah, there's the council, at the local level, races. There's obviously the mayoral seats up for grabs. At the moment, I say the Bridges campaign is one of the primarily one we're working on at the moment. Yeah.
So look out for that. Follow Bridges for the People.
Yes, Bridges. Yeah, they're on Twitter. I believe they're on Instagram as well. They're doing a lot of great work. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for your great work.
Oh,
and thank you for the conversation. It was awesome.
Yeah.
Till next time.